It's mock draft season, and it's dueling mocks on today's Peacock and Williamson, the Peacock mock and the Williamson mock. How do they differ in the top half of this NFL draft with trades coming at you right now?
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All the everydayers subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Even if you're not an everydayer and you're a first timer here, we appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button and hang out with us every day talking about the NFL. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, we've got Williamson's mock and Peacock's mock. We're going to go back and forth, picks 1 through. I think we'll get the first half. It's too long for to get all 32 picks of round 1, but we have all of those picks, Matt. And so, listeners, let us know at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL in the YouTube comments. Let us know if you want to hear the second half of our dueling mock drafts as well, maybe later on in the week. Let's start with pick 1.1, which I think is at this point just it's
formality at this point.
Formality. Turn the card in. Remember back in the day when teams would say who the first pick was going to be, and there was all these contract negotiations, and so they had to figure out the contract first. And it's like, all right, so-and-so and whatever team, they figured out that contract, and that's going to be the first pick in the draft. And then we're on to pick 2. They've tried to keep some suspense in recent years, so it's not going to be that early, but I think we've known for a while it's going to be Caleb Williams, especially when you trade Justin Fields, Caleb Williams to the Chicago Bears. Lock it in for both mock drafts, right? So
100%. It's funny you brought that up, though, because when you were a kid, it'd be like, okay, they got the contract done with this guy, and now the team 2 can get a contract done. But it was a bigger deal then, too, because the contracts weren't slotted. Remember, these guys used to hold out, and that's not enough. The contracts were a bigger deal. So in a way, it's cooler, but it'd also be like the Bears could almost turn in this card right now, and we'd all just know,
Absolutely.
What do you got?
Number 2 then gets a lot more interesting. Who do you have the Washington Commanders taking at pick number 2, Matt?
I prefer Drake May personally, but I don't think they agree. I have them sticking and picking and taking Jaden Daniels.
I like that pick. If I had to bet on what the pick is going to be, I think it's Jaden Daniels right now. But my scenario, I went with the what are we hearing? What do we know about the NFL draft right now scenario? Fascinating results, Matt, in my mock draft. I did not expect it to go this way when I sat down and started writing names next to teams. And I'm going with the report out of the combine that J.J. McCarthy is a guy that could go as high as number 2, and that might, in fact, be the pick for the Washington Commanders. Number 2 overall, the guy with the most helium in this class, J.J. McCarthy going to the Washington Commanders at pick number 2. And the what happens after this is even more shocking to me than J.J. McCarthy going number 2, because he's basically in ink in the top 4 at this point in most mock drafts.
I mean, I'm not an ear to the grindstone insider type, but when I was at the owners' meetings, it consistently came up that McCarthy is very much in the mix for number 2. And coaches love what he does. And I mean, this is McCarthy season. Coaches, interviews, pro days, not that his tape was bad, but Harbaugh vouching for him, I could see it. He still is my wide or quarterback 4 by a distant margin behind the top 3. But that doesn't matter what we think,
Right. And at the owners' meetings, Tom Pelissero said the name he heard most often when he's asking around, talking about the Washington pick at number 2, it was J.J. McCarthy. So we'll see. It's also lying season, Matt. So is this that version of that?
Right.
But with what we're hearing right now, And you got to go through the scenarios. What happens if this happens? Well, what happens in my mock draft if JJ McCarthy goes number 2? I was a little bit surprised by it. We'll get to that next. What is number 3 on your mock draft for the New England Patriots? What are they doing here?
I want to hear yours. Go for it, because since McCarthy went, I'll get to mine in a minute here. You lead off for number 3.
Okay. So, well, number 3 for me is then. You know what? Let's do, Matt. Let's go through mine and then go through yours, and just go straight through rather than go back and forth in these dueling mocks, because there's such a. I don't want people to get lost in why things are happening the way they're happening. Okay. Usually I think it's good to go back and forth, but I'm going to stick with mine here because this is what's happening about this. So the New England Patriots, let's get in their domes. Okay. JJ McCarthy. What if they like Drake May? And let's say the Patriots, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, Patriots, let's see who they like. Well, Alex Van Pelt's offense, I don't know if Jaden Daniels is a great fit there. So I think they might prefer Drake May and are maybe hoping Drake May falls to them. But if May goes to Washington, maybe they've had those conversations with the Minnesota Vikings, and the Minnesota Vikings are prepping to maybe go up to number 3. But if May falls, they stick and pick. So I have Drake May going to the New England Patriots with them staying there because that's their preferred player. So they don't want to move out of pick number 3.
I hear you. Makes sense. I mean, I like May better than Daniels. If I knew I could get May at 3, I would be a lot less adept to trade out of that spot if I'm the Patriots. And trust me, I am usually a stick and pick the quarterback guy when you stink and you're rebuilding. But my worry with this, and this is no offense to your pick, of course, because I would strongly consider it if I was New England as well, is May struggled this past year because he had nothing around him and he tried to do so much. Well, he'd go to a situation where there's nothing around him, it's not a very comfortable landing spot.
Well, look, I can tell you this, if my mock draft extended and I kind of looked at the top of the second round, I mean, I'm putting Ladd McConkey, I'm putting, whatever name I can find at wide receiver for the New England Patriots in round 2. And you got to build that nest. And I don't know how early Drake May would play, and you would hope not to ruin the young man and get him in there too early. It might be a situation where he sits even for an entire year, but you're definitely building it long term here, and you got to fix the nest because they tried to plug a quarterback into that nest in New England a couple of years ago, and it didn't work out because the nest was so bad, and they might have ruined that quarterback, right? And you don't want to do that again. No. So I get you, but I think in this scenario it has to be the right quarterback. And I think in this scenario, maybe Drake May is the quarterback. Like, okay, we'll take May if he's there. If not, let's do a deal maybe and allow someone to come up. And so the fact that JJ McCarthy goes 2, now May's the pick here, but this is what gets fascinating to me. Well, now the Minnesota Vikings say, oh crap. Well, the guy that fits our scheme just went number 2, just went number 3. We thought we were going to trade up with them. So maybe they're not willing to give up 3 first-round picks to go up with the Arizona Cardinals at pick number 4 to get Jaden Daniels, because maybe he's not the perfect fit there. So I'm looking at fits, and the fits I like for Jaden Daniels are 2 and the Giants at 6. And so if Washington goes a direction that's not Jaden Daniels, which teams are going to like Jaden Daniels the most? And I don't know if the Vikings are going to be that team. So then now the Arizona Cardinals sit here, and I'm trying to figure out all these places where they're going to be trades. This turns out to be the non-trade scenario, Matt, where now the Cardinals sit there, and the teams that we're calling them, the players they're looking to pick aren't exactly there anymore. And so they say, well, we don't want to drop back 2 spots and lose the wide receiver we want to take. It's not worth it for an extra 3rd round pick. We got a whole bunch of picks anyway. So we're not going to trade with the Giants, who might want to get up and get a quarterback, or a team that's trying to get in front of the Giants maybe. So we're going to stick and pick as well. And so then it becomes Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals at pick number 4.
Okay, so, I like the logic. And I got a handful of responses here. Okay. One, going back to May to New England. You said this without saying it, but I think Jacoby Brissett's the perfect guy to let May sit too. So that's a little more palatable. Plus, he's younger than the Jaden Daniels 6-year guys, the Nixes, the Penix. So I think he could use some time. Cool. You also mentioned it. I mean, if it went down that way and I were the Giants, I'd be hounding the Cardinals to get the 4, because Daniels did fall. Things worked perfect from a Giants perspective, but does the Cardinals want to go all the way to 4 and lose Marvin? I could see them saying, we'll just stick and pick the stud for Kyler. That makes all the sense in the world. And another thing you kind of said without saying that I also agree with you is you're implying to me, and I think I agree, that McCarthy is ahead of Daniels on the Vikings board.
Yes, this is the scenario where let's say there's 6, 7 teams that could potentially take a quarterback in round 1 at some point. They have different draft boards. And so not every team is going to want to give 3 first rounders to get all 4 of the top quarterbacks in the draft. And so if the scenario falls where the guy you're looking at that you like is gone, well, now you don't want to trade all that to move up. And who are you trading with? And how far are you going? So you get in all the minds of all these teams. And I was surprised how few spots I thought there was going to be a trade with just McCarthy going number 2 instead of basically any other quarterback. It changes the entire thing. But McCarthy going 2, which is one of the rumors coming out of owners' meetings, it changed the draft more than I thought and actually stunted the ability for trades in this particular scenario if teams feel the way I think they might about some of the quarterbacks and who values who the most and who likes who else the most.
Yeah, and I think this is all really fascinating because it's always a domino effect, you know, that the ripple effect. And back to what we said to start the show, I think it would be tremendous for the league if the Bears could say, we signed Caleb Williams on April 2nd, April 3rd, and then all these things could shake out for the next couple of weeks where, okay, Washington's fielding calls, but they're going to stick with McCarthy. Oh, man, as opposed to having it all happen Thursday night within 15-minute increments, maybe we could do once a week. There might be a trade up to the top for a new quarterback, you know?
Right. Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah. Cause you're like, then this and then this. But we're not done. So that move at 2, that one domino changes so much, including picks 5 through 13, how those are different. We'll get to that next. And then we'll get to
takes Marvin off the board for the Chargers, obviously.
Right. Exactly. So we will get to the rest of that mock, and then we'll look at Williamson's scenarios.
We might just have to stick with yours today. I'm kind of fascinated. We always do mine.
It's only interesting, I think, at the top. At the top,
there's ripple effects. Yeah,
and the folks want to hear some of your trades that you got going. So you did have trades. I will put that out there. There are trades in Matt's mock. Fewer trades than I expected in the Peacock mock. Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time if you want at no additional charge, and learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So the top 4 picks, no trades in this mock draft so far are number 1, Caleb Williams, number 2, JJ McCarthy to Washington, Drake May 3 to the New England Patriots, 4, Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Arizona Cardinals. So now we've already established that in my world that I'm living in right now in my head is Kevin O'Connell, the Minnesota Vikings, Kwesi, the GM, like they're looking at this team like, man, you know what? This went horribly for us, and the deals we had in place aren't going to work now. We can't go up to get a quarterback that we wanted, and I don't know if multiple first round picks is right for Jaden Daniels. We don't know if he's the right fit. So let's wait and see if he slides that we can get for less than the big high end, and maybe even he falls to 11 to us. Who knows? Or maybe we wouldn't draft him at all. That's the scenario I'm working in my headspace here. So you get to pick 5, and the Chargers might be game to do something here, but the New York Giants are like, okay, well, maybe we can make a deal, just moving up one spot with the Chargers. But then I think of other teams like the Raiders. I would love Raiders and Jaden Daniels. I think that'd be a fantastic move. But the Raiders can't trade with the Chargers in the division, right?
Sure.
The Broncos at 12 and the Raiders at 13 are like, well, now we're hamstrung because even if we want to get ahead of Minnesota and we want to get ahead of New York, they're not going to trade with us in the division. Is Jim Harbaugh going to send a potential star quarterback to an AFC West team? So now that thwarts another spot where there could have been a trade with the teams at 12 and 13 to get up to 5 to get a quarterback. So I've got a trade of the Giants just going up one spot.
That's what I was about to suggest. That's cool. Okay.
Yeah, one spot. It's the New York Giants going up one spot, and
maybe it's a third-round pick or a future second.
Third-round pick. It's not big compensation, but it's the quarterback they like. They get to go up one spot, and for the Chargers, it's a free pick because they're going to get the same guy anyway. So pick 6 is the New York Giants moving up. They get Jaden Daniels at pick 5, and then the Chargers fall back one spot at pick 6 and select Malik Neighbors, wide receiver. So that's the top 6 scenario here. I did get one trade, but it was only one team going up one spot rather than what I thought I would do. And Vikings fans out there probably pulling their heads out, pulling their hair out, because it's like, man, this is the one scenario where we couldn't trade up and get our quarterback.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And the Giants are kind of the winners there by being patient and the way things fall. They still have day 2 to go get a receiver, which they need badly, or 2. Or maybe they even call the Bengals and be like, hey, how about we give you something for T. Higgins? And then that offense looks totally different, And the Chargers don't lose anything in the whole process. They just pick up a mid-round pick or whatever.
No matter what, the Chargers still at a great spot. Like,
no doubt.
Things cannot go bad for the Chargers here. And they can actually make it so their division opponents don't go get a quarterback either. That
is a nice ripple effect, too. Because, boy, the Raiders and Denver are in some no man's land. They might be the desperate teams.
Right. So if there's a quarterback on the board, and that means Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably off the board, and you're the Chargers at 5, you get to control who gets that quarterback.
Yeah, which is a lot of power. I mean, I think Harbaugh's even come out and said draft kind of starts at 5. It's like we have the first overall pick,
Yeah. Joel to the Tennessee Titans at pick number 7. It's the
chalkiest pick in the history of the world. Everyone has.
I remember a 7th pick being this chalky. It's like, what something has to happen to where this can't be the pick, right? You can't ever know this far in advance what pick 7 is, right? Pick 1 is one thing, but pick 7, we already know. It's kind of wild how it's turning out this way. But I mean, there's no other way. There's no reason to put another player in here for the Titans at 7.
No, it just works. Probably won't in the end. We'll all mock it there, and it won't happen.
Yeah, it can't happen.
End up as a Charger.
Something else has to really shake things up. I can't wait to see what that is. Quinyon Mitchell, I've got the first defensive player in the draft going, cornerback out of Toledo. Just knocked the pre-draft process out of the park. Going to the Falcons at pick number 8. Rome Odunze, wide receiver from Washington, going at pick 9 to the Chicago Bears, building that nest for Caleb Williams. And this
I know they need defense, but that's a dream scenario to me to get what I think is maybe the 3rd best player in the draft at 9.
Right. And it's best player. And Keenan Allen's not young, like
2 years back,
right? So, and rookie wide receivers take some time as well. So this is a future number 1 for Caleb Williams, who's going to, have a low, maybe a low target share, nice soft landing in the NFL as a number 3 guy early in his career.
No, I'm with it. I think that's ideal.
This is another ear to the ground thing. And I heard something recently, and I was always shocked how so many teams, so many analysts had Talise Fuaga, tackle out of Oregon, going to pick 10 in the Jets. And apparently, and remember a couple of years ago with Zach Wilson, everybody knew who the Jets pick was going to be. I don't know if Joe Douglas is got people that he talks to, but I heard that the reason why we're seeing Fuaga at 10 so much is because it's not a secret at all that that's who they love. And if he's on the board, they might take him there. So that's interesting.
He could be a guard for a year,
Right. And so, someone who is a future offensive tackle, could play guard. They still have a need up front. And I fought with the idea of taking some other players in some other positions here, but this is an ear to the ground mock. This is an intuition mock. So I'm going Fuaga at 10, even though I would bet that he goes later than pick 10. And some other things might shake up how that happens. And then the Minnesota Vikings, who weren't able to trade up for a quarterback, they sit back and select Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia.
Not bad. I mean, Hawkinson's banged up, and they're very different anyways. That wouldn't prohibit me from taking what's the remaining best receiver on the board. Interesting stuff. I was going to bring this up with the Chargers, and maybe this is a whole podcast in itself. But if you asked Herbert, would you rather have Alt or Neighbors, what would he pick? If you asked Rodgers, would you rather have Fuaga or Bowers, what would he pick?
And my previous mock that we didn't talk about on this podcast had Bowers going 10, and I like it better for them.
Yeah.
But again, we're kind of going ear to the ground here. And, kind of best player available situation for the Vikings, who now just have to figure out how to make their passing game as good as possible without one of the top quarterbacks that they were able to get. So help Sam Darnold and help maybe. And look, to be honest with you, and looking at pick 12 and 13, it's not Bo Nix and it's not Michael Penix. I just think it's too high for both those guys. And so maybe it's a trade down scenario for the Broncos or the Raiders. Maybe it's a trade up into the first round scenario. Maybe it's a second round pick for those guys. But I don't see more than 4 going in the top 13. I could be wrong, and maybe some teams fall in love with one of these quarterbacks, but I don't see it happening here. But I think that's a good.
The Penix buzz is growing, though. Just a little nose of the grindstone.
And Knicks too. And that's the thing. Yeah. It's lying season. And we hear this every year. So which quarterback's going to fall? One of these guys is going to fall that we think is going to go somewhere. I have a hard time believing all 6 quarterbacks go in the first round. I think if I had to bet, I think, if you put 4.5, I would take the under. I think it's be 4 quarterbacks in the first round. I think that's how it's going to go. Where they go, I don't know. The McCarthy thing could be BS, and maybe teams don't like him as much as he's getting hyped right now around the league. And with Bo Nix and Michael Penix, I don't know, you could plug him in at 12 and 13 maybe, and I could see the fits. And I kind of do like Nix and Penix to the Broncos and Raiders respectively, but I like it in the second round. I don't like it in the first round. Let's hear the Williamson mock. I think we're on mock 4.0. Is it for
I think so. Here? I'll knock out my first dozen or 13 here.
Yeah. Let's hear what you got. Let's start at pick number 2, because we already know Caleb Williams is going. Actually, you know what? We got to pause.
I say you got a break here. You're in charge of this stuff.
Let's hear pick number. I took up too much of this podcast doing the Peacock mock.
I love it. I'm into it.
All right. What does Matt have going on in the top 10, 12, 15 of his mock draft? And I have a feeling there's more moves in his than there was in mine. Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The sports calendar is loaded right now. I mean, as soon as the calendar hits April, it's awesome. We got opening day. We got Major League Baseball, the NBA and NHL getting ready for some playoff action. Of course, the tourney, Final Four, and so much more. And FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on that action, because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use toward betting the tourney, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Caleb Williams in Matt Williamson's latest mock draft going #1 to the Chicago Bears. Who you got #2?
Jaden Daniels. A couple of these I'll just breeze over. I mean, Jaden Daniels, I have going to Washington. Fine. I wouldn't bet my firstborn on it, although he's kind of been pissing me off lately. But maybe.
Maybe you have to add a draft pick too.
Right, exactly. And so at that point, New England's sitting there with a dilemma. Do we take Drake May, who I bet they adore, or do we build the infrastructure? And I think Minnesota then says, we're going to give you more than the Godfather offer. We're going up to 3 and taking May. Do I feel super strong about that? No, but if May's sitting there, I think we all expect the Vikings to be aggressive to get to 3 or 4.
So if they don't get to 3, I'm sorry, I lost where your mock was here. You have
Williams, Daniels to their teams that are sitting still, and then I have the Vikings trade with New England.
Do have the Vikings going up for number 3? Okay, is that what is that? So 2 firsts this year plus a 2015 first rounder.
Yeah, and you maybe get a third back, or some spare change in return too. That's probably too much. But if I'm New England sitting there going, I get 3 firsts and draft a receiver and 2 offensive linemen, and then go with my quarterback next year, I think that might be the move.
2025. I said 2015. I don't even know what year it is. I learn what day it is these days. 2025 first round picks. Yeah, the 3 firsts is what it's going to take. You have to spend an extra first round pick to get up to pick 3 or pick 4. And if you can get up to 3, you're going to get up to 3. And so that's what the Minnesota Vikings do here. So now the Arizona Cardinals are on the clock at pick 4. What are they doing?
See, I think there's going to be a foolish move by the Raiders and or Broncos.
Oh,
I think these teams are backs against the wall. I'm not saying they're like on the hot seat, but they're in quarterback no man's land. Sean Payton does not trade down. He trades up in a Saints-like manner. I think the Raiders are looking at this like, man, we're really have to be aggressive to keep up with the Mahomes and Herberts and the nature of that division. So I went a little crazy here, and I got Arizona out of 4, trading down with the Raiders at 13, and the Raiders come up and get McCarthy.
So I've been thinking about this because everyone believes that the Minnesota Vikings are the team that's going to move up. If the Raiders or the Broncos, who are the 2 picks right after 12 and 13. So you're dropping one or 2 spots in the first round if you're a team that's moving down. If you traded with the Raiders or the Broncos instead of the Vikings, is a first round pick next year. So like let's say a team like
they're going all the way to 13 in this scenario.
Right. So basically my question is, if you're a team and you have offers that are very similar on the trade chart between the Raiders and the Vikings, for example, the pick you're getting this year is 2 spots further back, and you're getting pick 23 from the Vikings. But wouldn't you rather have the Raiders' first round pick next year?
That's my point, because I think they might pick first overall.
3, right? So
I think the Raiders and Denver are in for really long years, and if I can get their first out of this somehow, either one of those teams, now we're cooking.
Yeah. So like that might, if one of those teams is willing to deal, that might skew things toward a team saying, we like your offer, Vikings, but we think that 2025 pick is going to be better for us if we make this deal with the Raiders instead.
I mean, big picture thinking, which I think the Cardinals are right now, and hopefully some of these other teams, New England, the Chargers, in this neighborhood, I think I would rather have the Raiders or Broncos first round pick next year than even number 23 this year, let alone.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Either scenario, I'd rather have it than 23 this year. I'd rather have it than the Vikings first round pick next year.
Yep. I mean, that could very well be a lottery pick, and you're in the same position again. So then I kind of get boring.
Los Angeles Chargers at 5. Again, Jim Harbaugh gets the number 1 pick in the draft now with Marvin Harrison Jr. here.
Yeah, and I think Harbaugh would be like, I want Joe Alt. And then Herbert would be like, please give me Marvin Harrison. Come on. Our right tackle's not that bad. I have them taking Harrison.
And look, the Chargers did work on the offensive line in the offseason and sent all their wide receivers packing. They pretty much told us, look, we know what the draft is. We know what the players are going to be there for us at 5. We're going to take a wide receiver unless we move out and something else happens. But they could still take an alignment. I think they told us with their moves in the offseason that wide receiver is the pick for him at 5.
Yep. And then I did this just to be fun, but instead of giving the Giants Neighbors, I gave him a Dunze just because I wanted to respect this guy, and to call him a wide receiver 3 in any draft is unbelievable to me because I think he is remarkably good. So I just want to throw that out there that maybe some team wants a possession-ish more type receiver. But either way, I mean, they take a receiver at 6 and they're happy, but they don't get their quarterback. And of course, Alt at 7, which everyone on the planet has.
And here we go. I love this.
Then I get aggressive again. Yeah.
I love this. This is a Cards move. So the Cards that went from 4 to 13 come back up to get their guy at wide receiver. They didn't get Marvin Harrison Jr., but they still picked up an extra draft pick and now have moved back up with the Atlanta Falcons, which is a great spot to move down, I think, with where the Falcons are right now, to go get Malik Neighbors. I love this move for the Cardinals. Yeah,
and even if it's a Dunze, what's the difference? I mean, they come up to get a stud receiver at 8, which they desperately need. Maybe he's not quite Harrison, but you gained a lot of other stuff, which they need. This is the same type of move they made last year for Paris Johnson, the tackle. And frankly, if Atlanta's sitting there at 8, sure, they might consider Neighbors or a Dunze, but I don't really want to be the team taking the first defensive player off the board.
And that means the Chicago Bears have their pick of the best defensive player in this draft. And I like the fit for the Bears with Dallas Turner being the first defensive player. If it's the Falcons, I go Quinyon Mitchell. And so this is Dallas Turner, edge to Alabama. I love it.
Yeah, and I'd be a little disappointed. Bears would have loved the receiver to fall one more spot. We talked through that with your mock. And then I Bowersed it to the Jets, which is getting kind of chalky too.
Yep.
So then New England's there for their first pick, and They end up with Fashanu. I mean, this could be a franchise left tackle at 11. They still have a pick coming up at 23. And I think you'd have even more than that. You know, I didn't work through the trades exactly what you're going to get, but you get 11 and 23 and something else to give up that third overall pick.
And just
not a bad start.
Just to peek ahead here, let's finish this trade and pick 23 for the Patriots. You have Adonai Mitchell from Texas, wide receiver going. So you didn't get your wide receiver, but you're building the nest, or you didn't get your quarterback, but you're building the nest for that future quarterback in New England.
Yes. So I'm thinking you probably end up with Fashanu, Mitchell, and maybe the Vikings first round pick next year, in addition to your own. Okay.
Not bad. And we'll see that. Maybe that's a quarterback. Who knows?
And maybe when this draft ends, I call the Bengals and I'll give you next year's first or next year's second for T. Higgins, because I have 2 firsts next year, you know. All of a sudden, it looks pretty good for somebody to plop in there.
At 12, you have Bo Nix to the Denver Broncos. You had Bo Nix last time in your mock draft. Do you think Bo Nix is worthy of this selection?
No, I don't condone it at all. I just think they're going to be desperate.
Yeah, it's a desperation pick. It's like that's the cost of doing business. You need a quarterback. You got to draft them sooner than you want.
Yeah, and I really am being hard on the Broncos and Raiders, but I don't trust either organization right now. I think they're both in for terrible years. I would not want to be the GM of either team. I don't quite understand how they're team building at this point, and I think they might do dumb stuff.
And that brings us to the team that traded back from 8 to 13 in this mock, which was the Atlanta Falcons. We'll end it here. That's Jared Burch, edge rusher from Florida State.
And that could be Latu. That could be even Quinion Mitchell. But I'd feel a little more comfortable picking my first defensive player at 13 than 11. You know what I mean?
And looking at where the Falcons are,
or 13 than 8.
And 8, right? You're getting a free pick to pick from the same probably cluster of defensive players you might have selected at 8 anyway.
Exactly. And maybe even Turner falls to you. Who knows? But there's not that big a difference in that group to me.
I think my favorite move right now is the Cardinals double trade going back and back up again. I like that. And Monty Ossenford is always willing to make those moves.
So we pulled the trigger or pulled the curtain back of how it ends up. This is what the Cardinals ended up with in my mock is they go back to 8 to get Neighbors. And then they're sitting there at 27. They make a deal with my Steelers to get to 20 because Terry and Arnold was still there. So if you're the Cardinals and you could leave this draft with Arnold, Neighbors, and serious draft capital from next year, from the Raiders, probably their first overall pick next year, your first pick in first round.
So could you have
gold, man?
You kept the Raiders pick, but you traded your own first rounder. So now you have the Raiders pick instead of yours next year, right? And I
don't think you have to trade your future first to get from 27 to 20.
No, I was talking about the other trade to go from 13 to 8.
I still think you end up with 2 first-round picks. I think the Cardinals would still leave this somehow with their first, maybe not theirs, but you're definitely keeping the Raiders pick.
You could do a 2, and maybe even they trade pick 27 instead, or get another pick back or something like that. But
they do have picks.
Fantastic stuff. There's the dueling mock drafts, at least the first part of round 1, with a lot of different scenarios, how one pick could change everything. One trade could change everything. And that's why the draft is so fun. Let us know what you think at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or drop a comment on YouTube. Matt and I back tomorrow. Drop a question for our mailbag on Wednesday, by the way, on YouTube or on Twitter. We'll talk to you then right here, Peacock and Williamson.